The first is one of the classics, and that is simple. You just get some clay remnants and you chop them. And then what I'm going to do is to add a little bit of black so it wouldn't be all too blue. And then simply you just toss a little bit the chops and then stack them together. And you form a cube of some sorts. Just the whole idea is that if you're dealing with a little bit older scrap clay, you might have to warm it up in your hands a little bit. But anyway, work it until you get a fairly thick block that would be about the length of your desired pendant and half as long. Then all you need to do is to cut it in two, arrange the cut so it would form the mirror image that we call a Natasha. Then place it face down and shave on the back all the extra clay, because more than likely you will not be cutting it in perfect halves. So all you have to do after you shave the excess is to flatten it a little bit using your roller, just like so. Make sure that you do not deform it, so go only very little in terms of lengthening it. What you need to do is simply to make sure that it is perfectly flat. Then you can use some cling wrap to make more rounded corners, or you can cut it without cling wrap. And you can cut your own freeform pendant, or you can use a cutter. It's all up to you. Just use your imagination. We all love the Natasha beads and pendants because we never know what we are going to get, and everything we get, it's like from some magic world. So here is the first one, and this one you can do it as a variant, and I will show you. It's got a very little variation. You just add some gold leaf to it. Honestly, I have all this scrap clay from my friend Deborah. She sent me a whole bag full of scrap clay when I was getting really low on scrap clay. So I am joyfully playing with scrap clay and making stuff. So the variant to the first classic is adding some gold leaf. And then you do exactly the same, just make it into a cube, then lengthen the cube on one side so you would get the length of your desired pendant and about half the width. I wasn't happy with it the way it looked, so I'm lengthening it again. And then you simply cut it into, what I like to do a lot of times is to cut the base so it would sit straight, and then cut it into. And then proceed the same way. Join the two halves, make sure that you join them perfectly symmetrical there. And then put it face down, shave the excess, and then cut the shape of your pendant. The problem is that if you don't do it perfectly flat on the front, if you still have that joining line, you have to think that you cannot really sand it, because if you're going to sand it, you're going to lose the symmetry, because what's under the surface of that cut is not symmetrical anymore. So very careful when you flatten your the face of your pendant. You might want to even burnish using some paper, some wax paper, and so that you don't have to sand. The next variation, I'm going to add a little bit of white and a little bit of gold, you know, just to give a little bit more interest. And we are going to treat it pretty much like a mokume gane stack. So, of course, first chop and toss and mix your pieces really, really good. and then form them into a stack. Obviously, if we are going to make mokume gane, we will need a stack. And I'm going to take only half of it because we might need the other half for something else. So I'm forming my stack for mokume gane, making sure that they all stick to each other. And then, as in any other mokume gane, I am flattening it out, then I am stacking it and flattening it out and stacking it. And pretty much after that I'm going to deform it using my bowl stylus pen and the ripple blade, and then I will consolidate the stack. Oh yeah, I used the toothpick too, I forgot about that. And I'm going to use the toothpick on the back as well. But the way that you want to consolidate it is that you will do the cut in half through the deformation in the stack. So watch how I'm lengthening the piece, and obviously again I'm going to go for the length, the desired length of my pendant, and for half the width, so that when I cut it in half I will have the entire width of the pendant. And there we go. And I got Excalibur. Look at that. Isn't that Excalibur? So again, all you have to do is to shave the back and then cut your pendant in the desired shape. Now let's move on to the next one. For the next one I'm going to do, this is the most known classic Natasha bead forming. You just chop your pieces, you stack them in a big blob, and then you form a log, then a sausage, then pretty much you extend that sausage, and then you twist it, and it's up to you if you want to twist it less or if you want to twist it more. Generally I avoid twisting too much, except for a couple of cases, and I'll probably talk about that in a future tutorial, because if you do too much twisting then you get too many itty bitty lines, and you have the same phenomenon that happens when you deform too much mokume gane. That the lines that are way too thin kind of blur into each other, and you can see it properly only when you're very, very close. So again, another pretty Natasha bead. This one is done the most classical way, and once again you have to make sure that you burnish properly that joining line in the middle, because if you sand you're going to remove the superficial layer and you will lose the symmetry. And if by any chance you deformed your symmetry line, just manipulate the clay a little bit around and you'll get it back. And this was another way, and I guess I had something in there. Now let's see what's the next one. For the next one I'm going to make a Skinner blend jelly roll using white, wisteria, gold and black. And I will stack the Skinner blend. It doesn't have to be perfectly gradienty. Just get those lines to get one into the other pretty much, but not perfect. You don't need perfection in this one. Then stack it, and of course get it through the pasta machine through successive thinner and thinner settings until you get a long thin strip that you're going to roll into a jelly roll with the white part inside. Now with this jelly roll I will show you two different ways two different techniques. So let me first consolidate it a little bit to make sure that I don't have any kind of air pockets caught inside. So I will reduce it a little so I can cut it in two and use each half for a different way of making a Natasha pendant. The first half I'm going to very simply roll it into a sausage, and then I want to get a few sausages at different diameters, some thicker and some thinner, and after that I will cut my little sausages pretty much into pieces. You don't have to be perfectly measuring here. A little bit of randomness is just fine. And with this I'm going to actually do two different ones just to show you a little bit of a difference. So I'm first stacking together the pieces of sausage on the right, and you can see that they are of different diameters, of different thicknesses, and then I consolidate them together and I am making them into a rectangle. And this is pretty much the phenomenon on which, if you remember my tribal necklace, the central piece is done. And yes, you can even arrange these into spirals and then form your Natasha pendant. But the first one will be with straight lines. And again, the same way. Place it face down, shave the excess, flatten it, burnish it, make that middle line disappear, and then cut your pendant shape. To this we can do a variant, and that is putting all your pieces of sausage together, cutting them in half, and then pinching the ends, cutting them in half again and pinching the ends. Do the same with the remaining half of all your sausages. Then extend a little bit by rolling. Don't forget to taper the ends when you're rolling with your acrylic block. And then give it just one twist. Then put them together. And again, give it one more twist and the other way. This time twist it the other way, and then again consolidate your block, lengthen it to the length of your desired pendant. This one I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and I will tell you at the end of the video why. And the same as before, put it together, align it properly, place it face down, and then cut the shape of your pendant. With the other half, I'm going to cut it into 3 uneven pieces. Then I will be flattening my pieces. And then I will roll them, but you have to be very careful how you roll them. Roll them on the length, on the height, how it would be of the jelly roll. so that the pattern will be the same throughout the rolling thing, and then simply put them together. Consolidate your block and then S shape it. That is, just bend it one way from one end and the other way from the other end, so that you will obtain an S-shaped deformation. Then simply again extend your block to the length of the pendant you want to get. And here is another thing that I'm going to show you after I cut it in half and arrange it as usual and trim the back as I showed you in the beginning. This time I am not going to cut my pendant on the symmetry line. I am going to cut it asymmetrical, so that the symmetry line will not go vertically throughout the pendant, but will go pretty much horizontally, but not fully horizontally. It's more in a diagonal, because you don't have to go symmetrically. And I guess I had another piece of something scrap clay, but that can easily be fixed. And there we go, another pendant. Now for the fifth way, we are going to make first the retro cane, and here I'm using all pearlescents and metallics except for the black, and that is white pearl, antique gold, gold, bronze, and black. And as for all retro canes, when you place the roll in the extruder, make sure that the black is the first one to come out. Then simply extrude your large string. You need the die that's got the big round circle. Cut it in 2-inch lengths and then form your retro cane. I put the 2 inches together and then I'm gonna cut it in half and put them together again. Now watch this. What I'm going to do is to tilt the whole thing, see, on an angle. I'm going to press on the corner to tilt it, to tilt the direction in which the logs are going. And then again I'm going to cut it in half. And on this one you will not see how pretty it is until it will be fully sanded and buffed. You'll see that in the end. And again, cut your pendant and you have another one. And once again, be very careful about the middle joining line. Now, the next one can only be done with remnants of pearlescents and metallics. Chop some translucent in the stack and then form pretty much a rectangular stack. Then slice your stack. And yes, your translucent pieces have to be fairly big chopped, and then simply swap the slices and then reform by stretching it out a little bit and then stacking it, cutting it and stacking it. This way, whenever you'll obtain your pendant, you'll have several layers of transparency. And there'll be like little windows of transparency. And the effect is quite spectacular, as you will see again in the end after it is fully baked and sanded and buffed. And one more time, cut the shape of your desired pendant. Now for the next way, we need cane ends. Here I have some butterfly cane ends, butterfly wing cane ends. On this one you have to very little chop your cane ends. You need big pieces, not small ones. And once again, if the scrap clay is a little bit older, you might have to warm it up for a while before it can stick it to itself. And I do that by simply pressing it in my hands until I see that it indeed sticks to itself and I can form a stack with it. And this method has actually more than one variant. This is the very first one, and it is very simple. You see, again, I cut the end so I can have a perfectly aligned center. And one more time I place it face down. I'm going to shave the back so I can have a perfectly flat back and an even sheet for my pendant. And then nicely flatten it to make that joining line in the middle disappear, and then I will cut my pendant shape. And here we go. That's another way of making a Natasha pendant. Now, as the variant, again, once you do the stack, slice it and then alternate the slices. Make your slices about 2 millimeters thick and then alternate it with translucent on the thickest setting. And then consolidate. After you consolidate it, you simply flatten it several times and then cut and stack. And then obviously again you form your stack so you can cut a pendant. And this specific thing I will show you in the next one, because you can do it with this method, but you can do it with the plain regular large chop and stack. But let's see first how the Natasha pendant looks with this. The variant is if you make a larger stack, you can actually make not just one pendant, but you can make multiple pendants. So I'm going to shape again another stack, and this time I will show you how you can get at least 2 pendants, but you can go as far as 4 depending on how big your stack is. But you want to flatten it to the point that the translucent layer is quite translucent-y before forming your final stack. So you want your stack to be at least about 8 millimeters thick. And then you prepare a base of scrap clay about 1 millimeter thick, and then you start cutting your stack in slices. You will need an even number of slices in order to obtain pendants, because all slices will coordinate as Natasha's, as mirror images 2 by 2. and that way you can create more than a single pendant out of one stack. And what you do, you simply place your pairs of slices on the scrap clay, and you can create more than one pendant that way. I made so many pendants with this tutorial, and I will have a surprise for you. In future tutorials, we will go again the 7+ ways, and I will show you, using all these pendants, 7+ ways of making bezels and 7+ ways of making bails for your pendants and beads. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, do not forget to like and subscribe. And not only that, but make sure that you click on that little bell so you would be notified every time I post a new tutorial. Because sometimes I even post more than once a week. It all depends on how my health is that week. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that little bell. And also watch till the end and read the video description on how you can help support my channel. Happy claying!